But yeah, that's definitely one of the things. You're listening to WNHH 103.5 FM, NewHavenIndependent.org. Good evening. You're listening to the show, and this is Michelle Turner. I have the good pleasure of being its host. This is my second night in the studio.
2 nights in a row.
2 nights in a row. And that's because it is election time. Usually I am involved in a postmortem, and what postmortem means in our business, not dead, but certainly a review of what went on the previous evening. So who better to do that with me besides the squad is squad adjacent Redux, John DeAndre. John, thank you so much for coming in.
It's good to be here. And congratulations to the squad on their work last night.
Thank you.
You guys did a good job.
Thank
Although
you.
you know how I feel about calling you guys the squad now.
I know.
It lost its luster here somehow. But you did a good job. And it was...
we had a lot of people working behind
really
the scenes. And
good feminine focus there. I mean,
yeah.
women power.
Well, not only that, how many women of color do you get to see
right, add that
calling politics in one room?
No.
And just leaving us to be.
And
you don't
folks
get that.
with different backgrounds. I mean, you had a former elected official. You have an up-and-coming journalist.
Yeah.
You're,
I'm a postmortem.
You've been there, done that.
Yeah.
So it was really good to watch.
And it was odd for me in the respect that I've never sat on the other side of the microphone on election night. I'd always been out in the field.
Right.
Or, as you know, I organized the first 4, 5, 6 for WQUN back in the day. So
in our WELI days, we were both out in the field.
Yeah, we were both out in the field.
Right. But our QUN days, I got to sit in the chair most of those years.
Right.
And it was, it was nerve-wracking. It was more nerve-wracking, I think, than being out on the street, trying to cover a story.
Well, I think the difference, too, is when you're in the studio, there's always an update.
Yes.
And pretty much with a candidate, when you're so-called embedded with that candidate, the only news that you really get is coming from the newsroom.
Yes.
And you really kind of have to depend on that. Or if they are posting numbers. Right. And if they're posting numbers, then you got to check that against what's in the newsroom.
Right. And I always worked with some pretty good people in the building.
Yeah.
Depended who you had with you in the building. And
that's true.
Then we had a good crew that we did it so many years over and over again. Yeah. We worked out the kinks, but there were some major nail biters in terms of technical issues sometimes.
Right.
But, in the end, it's the end, and we pulled it out every year.
And it always sounded good.
Right.
People really respected the fact that we got it right.
And we had the liberty in Old Dinosaur Radio to format it out where we were consistently on the air. We didn't have to worry about interrupting programming.
Right.
We were on live.
Right.
Where I was dipping in and out of television and on social media. And the TV folks still, I don't know, I don't want to bash them because, I never made it across the aisle there, but they still don't seem to get how to do election night. I still don't understand why certain stations, like one station in particular that has 2 stations, one had one station doing their Capitol Report folks, and then the other station was showing the ABC programming and cutting in. And it was like, well, why couldn't they just uplink what they had on MyTV9? I don't understand. I don't understand that.
It always seems to be something about the timing of them doing it, as opposed to being committed. It's always the advertisers. So
are they obligated to the network programming? What they had on MyTV9 was excellent. It should have been simulcasted on 8 as well, or the 8 newscaster should have been with them, and they should have just run one show.
Yeah.
But who am I to say that?
Well, you're only John DeAndre, who used to be.
And one of my areas was, special programming.
Yes.
try to do it on radio,
Yeah.
to try to do it on TV. With those resources that they had, it should have been playing on both stations.
Yeah.
But there's probably, contractual obligations to the ABC network.
Yeah, to the network. And I was going to say what I meant by, them kind of doing it a certain way, meaning that, there was always a sense of urgency for us.
Correct. We had to get that story on the air.
We had to get it on the air. And yet they don't have that sense of urgency like we did.
No.
And that's probably, you're right, because of contractual obligation to run X amount of programming, X amount of commercials.
Where on 9, they can just,
Yeah.
they can open it up and let it go. Where on the ABC, they're
Right.
obligated.
But the other piece in that, John, and correct me if I'm wrong, our salespeople sold election night.
When we were at WELI,
Yeah.
it was as if it were, a snow day. And,
Right.
when we were in snowstorm mode, we were raking in the cash. And yes,
Right.
election night was always sold. And even at WQUN at times, in the earlier years, more than the later years,
Yeah.
there were parts of it that were sold.
That were sold.
And yes, it could be a moneymaker.
Mhm.
It could be a moneymaker.
So, with that said, we had quite a few big, what we would consider big and small elections.
Yeah. Why don't we do outside of New Haven before
Okay.
we actually get to the
Yep.
nitty gritty?
Yep.
Outside of New Haven, there really weren't any big changes except in provincial Madison, which seems to be going back and forth over the last 15 or 20 years. It swung back to the Democrats.
Yeah, because their folks were really fighting it out there. Madison, Branford. There was really a power struggle between the Republicans and Democrats for quite some time.
And just like the really hyper local stuff you saw in New Haven, it was going on in shoreline communities, their style.
Yeah.
So Madison swung back Democrat. Branford retained the Republican incumbent, Jamie Cosgrove.
Mm-hmm.
He's in now for a 4th 2-year term. Milford, Mayor Blake, Democrat, 6th term.
Wow.
Orange, Jim Zioli's been in now. This is his 8th
I was getting
term.
ready to say,
Republican incumbent,
How
8th
many-
term.
okay, so how many years are in a term?
Well,
are we still
usually
at 2?
we're still in a 2. Around us,
Okay.
we have 2-year terms.
Okay.
Bridgeport, Hartford, and I think Middletown
8
have the 4-year
terms?
terms. 8 terms for Jim Zioli. That's now 16. We're looking
Yeah.
at two almost closing out 2 decades.
Yeah.
North Haven, Mike Frieda, Republican incumbent, didn't have a challenger. Wallingford, 19th term for Republican incumbent Bill Dickinson.
Wow.
19th term. I was there in November 1983, videotaping it as my internship project for the University of New Haven. So I was there for his very first win. He was 33 years old.
So let me ask you the question, because you're somebody that's been on both sides of the fence. You have been in politics and you also have worked as a reporter. So I can ask you the question, what is it, in your humble opinion, that makes these folks stay in for 19 and 20 years?
I think, I can talk for Mayor Dickinson, probably, slow and steady,
Yeah.
raises the taxes very incrementally. The Wallingford has low power rates.
But that's because they have their own power
they have their
grid
own
as well.
power, quasi-owned power plant.
Yeah.
Low water rates. These are the things that people vote their wallet.
Yeah. And you find that more in the suburbs, right?
Right. And there's, a good, somewhat decent school system, I would say. And like in Orange, that's a much smaller community than,
Right.
let's say, a Wallingford or even a North Haven. In Orange, things are slow and steady. There's no reason to vote the folks out. But
now,
in East Haven, they did.
Yeah.
In Joe Maturo didn't run.
He didn't run.
Right. And the Republicans had a primary. And my belief is when primaries are divisive. So the minute you have a primary, you have a good chance of, in the general election, losing the race. That's my
But is
my own little druthers on that. So what happened? The Republicans lost the race to a Democrat. So it swung back to the Democrats. It's been predominantly Republican for the last 25 years.
Right.
Just about. April Capone was in, I think, for 2 terms.
For 2 terms. She served about 4 years.
Mayor Maturo was in for...
What, 15?
15 years, and that was April, and then he came back.
He came back, and he had another 2 to 3 terms.
Yeah, and Joe Carfora, a Democrat, beat out the big Steve Tracy, the Republican candidate, who that's what he went by. And I don't know if he's a wrestler or is he a wrestler?
He's a former wrestler, and that's why there's
But he
big
had
Steve.
major Republican endorsement.
Yes, he did.
Not only from Greater New Haven, but from the state, and he lost. And again, I can hear it in my head. A good friend of mine saying primaries are divisive, and I think that might have played itself out in East Haven. In West Haven, Democratic incumbent Nancy Rossi won a 2nd term.
Okay.
So there were no upsets other than Milford
was that her
and East
first
Haven.
term previous?
This was just her first term, yeah.
Okay.
O'Brien, she beat out the last time. And
Right.
O'Brien's White Elephant was that project, which is still an eyesore now along just before First Avenue, Water Street. When you cross over the Kimberly Avenue Bridge, they want to make that a mall.
Right.
It's still sitting there, lots of stuff
Well,
in
you know what
foreclosure.
happened? The developer got sick, and I can't remember now if he passed on and his partners were supposed to fulfill it, and I don't think they've gotten past that point.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you have all of those homes that people were put out of still standing.
Yeah.
And
they knocked down some businesses.
Yeah.
Some properties are brownfield sites.
Yep.
Because they were factories or, mills
right.
years ago. A friend of mine lives right there on the corner of First Avenue and Main, and she looks at this wasteland. And I keep telling her, not in your lifetime. The best thing they could do is just pave everything over and put carnival rides. Make it the new Seven Rock, Make it carnival rides. I really don't think a mall is ever going to go there personally. I mean, I lived on the other side of it. I lived in City Point for 2 years when this first started, and I could see from where I lived that area. And I know the Kimberly Avenue Bridge wouldn't be able to handle mall traffic.
All that traffic.
Make it a seasonal recreational area.
But they did widen the street and
do
a lot of
doing some
reconstruction, and they did something to the ramp to get off there.
Oh, they reconfigured the exit ramps at Boulevard.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
that's when I lived there. It was chaos for those 2 years. Absolute chaos. And then they changed the lanes.
Right.
The lanes to get on the queue versus getting on 91 North. I was there for all of that fun. So basically around us, the only changes were, the surprise was East Haven and Madison. And the fact that the rest of them are in now, successive terms. I mean, 6 terms, 8 terms, 19 terms.
But what does that say? I mean, again, you're saying that people are voting with their wallet, but are people just solely paying attention to their money?
I think some of it. First of all, I don't have the percentages of voters that went to the polls, but it was dark, cloudy, cold, and it was sprinkling out.
Yeah.
I don't think the percentage of people registered voters going to the polls in all of these towns were high. Maybe in a town like one I didn't mention was Hamden.
Yeah.
Probably was higher than, let's say, East Haven or Milford. There's no reason to go to the polls on a local election unless you're going to vote somebody out.
Well, and I guess that's true because people
you can find a reason not to go.
Well, I mean, you would believe that because it's a mayoral race, that you would get the turnout from party devotees.
Right.
But even then, people, I never will forget how Barack Obama made a robocall. He was not running, but he made a robocall for somebody locally who was running for office. Can't remember in the moment who it is. But when I went to different sites, people were wrapped around the building to vote because they had gotten that robocall from him.
He woke them up.
But here we are a few years later,
And we're back asleep.
and we're back asleep. And it's like, this is what part of the civics conversation that
Right.
you and I have, because I am trying to figure out, why is it that people are so,
People come out for presidential elections,
Yeah.
and everything else is a crapshoot, basically, or you pray that you get the people out. Sometimes some of these people get in. Now, I'm not sure what happened in East Haven,
Mhm.
other than they had a primary. And I told you before, those are divisive to me.
but why
I'm
why
not
do
sure.
you think
Maybe
they're
the
divisive?
D's, the Democrats, got the people out and said, you know what? Some of these Republicans are going to stay home. Let's make sure we get the vote out. Maybe that played itself out in East Haven. In Madison, there was infighting. Again, if you only have 15 to 20% of the electorate going out to vote, that's not a lot of people.
And you're saying
You could
primaries
flip
don't help
a
that.
seat.
Yeah.
The primaries are divisive. The only town I didn't talk about really was Democrat incumbent Mayor Kurt Lang in now. He gets
Yeah.
60% of the vote. That surprised me because that's lower than he probably
Expected to get.
expected to get, although I haven't had a conversation with him. So his Republican challenger got 40%. That should be some indication that he's got to make some changes. And one of the writers for The Independent wrote a wonderful piece late this afternoon that hit social media.
Mhm.
It really looked at the election in Hamden, the changes in the council,
Yeah.
lots of women power, diversity,
Yeah.
and it was a well-written, well-thought-out article, well-researched article. Having worked there, two
Right.
decades ago for one term,
Right.
the reporter really hit on a lot of different issues that face a community the size of Hamden and a community diverse as Hamden is.
Well, and it's funny too, because the folks who have been protesting about the officer and the officer involved shooting posted this morning that they were going to be protesting. So welcome back, Kurt Lang.
Right, exactly. That's not going away. When I was
No.
here a couple of weeks ago,
No.
that's going to be a long,
That's
drawn-out
gonna,
court
until
case.
they really handle
He
it.
has since pleaded not guilty, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is going to be a long, drawn-out court case, and then you have to deal with the police commission.
Right.
And this is not going to go away for Mayor Lang as much as I think he would like it to.
Yeah. It's not. It's not.
It's not.
And he's got to really bring some folks together,
Right.
lock the door, and say, okay, nobody leaves. Somebody has the courage to do that.
Since we last met, they rallied in New Haven and they rallied in
Right.
Hampton. And I'm not sure of the woman, but she's got a great radio voice. She's leading the
Carrie
group.
Ellington?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Carrie Ellington.
She's extremely vocal.
Yes,
she's
she is.
well prepared.
And she's
not going away.
She's not going away, and she is becoming a well-established activist.
Yes.
So people are respecting that. And when she calls and she puts out that bat signal for people to get together,
Right.
they come together.
And she really gave the police commission back in the early summer a run for its money. And she's legitimately asking questions. I mean,
Right.
she's not just being a quote troublemaker.
Right.
She's done her homework, and there's a lot to that case.
There's a lot to that case, and not only that, we have to remember Hamden's history.
Correct.
When it comes to this sort of thing.
Right.
My days as a young person living in Hamden, the riots at the high school, the fact that they sat on the border of Hamden and New Haven like it's the Iraq-Iran border,
Right.
according to a very good friend of mine who made that statement years ago. And it's something that has not been fully addressed.
Right. Well, I think this incident is going to help shape the future. And Mayor Lang, in what I read today online, talks about, doesn't talk specifically about this case, but talks about the diversity, talks about the need for more of a community-focused police department. He has to be careful what he says
Yeah.
because of the lawsuit.
Right.
But I think he recognizes it, and the author of this in-depth article on Hamden really focused on how the council now has some folks on it that really are probably going to work towards or pressure him
Yeah.
towards actually having to make some changes. So
Make
it'll be
some
interesting
changes.
to see.
Yeah.
Will this be
Yeah.
his last term? Who knows? Does he have future sights on other seats? Probably. Is he a career politician?
Yes.
Most likely. I mean, when I knew him, he was a first-term council member from the State Street area.
Okay.
That's over 20 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. I was going to say that's been a while ago.
Yeah.
And, it cracks me up putting his Italian name on those signs.
Balzano Lang.
Yeah, Balzano Lang. It's like, wait a minute, weren't you Kurt Lang? Now all of a sudden you're Balzano Lang? I didn't think that Hamden's Italian population was still that big, but I guess it makes a difference. I don't know. Roxana Walker Canton run a seat on the Board of Education in Hamden, and
Okay.
she got the most votes of anyone
Yeah.
last night.
And they talked a lot about in the article Mrs. Lewis, who
Yes.
I had her son actually as a student,
Oh,
I
really?
believe. Yeah. Mrs. Lewis is a big activist, and she does her homework. And like there's diversity now on the Hamden Town Council. It's not a bunch of old hacks. And they're probably going to give Kurt a little run for his money.
Well, that's good, though. They need that because, like I said, ever since we've been there, when we moved in 1970, basically folks were ignored.
Mhm.
They knew that people of color were coming in,
Right.
and they were like, oh, okay. But it was never an acknowledgement.
Right.
It was never any real respect put into it. In the 80s, when the Times said, guess what? Hamden, you're getting even more people of
Right.
color.
School desegregation, all
Yeah.
of that.
And, even now, there's a whole thing with Shepherd Glen having too many kids of color as opposed to not.
Right.
So, and it's one of those things where I'm hoping that this new town council will wrestle them to the ground and say, open your eyes. Let's figure this out.
It is a pretty diverse community, though. I mean,
It- it-
I'm
and
in
it
and out
has
of it on
been.
the weekends a lot in the
Yeah.
stores and stuff. It is compared to where other places I've lived. It's pretty diverse, and it doesn't have the crime problems. I
Mhm.
mean, to a degree. I mean, obviously, it had an issue.
Right, with the
At,
cops.
yeah, but I mean, you don't feel unsafe there. It's very well mixed.
Mhm.
Not only black and white, but other ethnicities.
Other people.
Yeah.
Other people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's probably been that way since the mid to late 80s.
hmm
But I think people are just really kind of like tearing off the veil and saying, okay, look, it's here. You can't ignore it anymore. You can't hide it. We've got to work together.
There's people of color living north of the Parkway. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And have been for quite some
Yeah,
time.
for a
but-
long time.
Yeah.
Let's face,
so-
let's face the music and
Yeah.
dance here.
Yeah. So, with all of that said, that leaves us with Nahaven.
Well, why don't we start with this? 30 years ago at this time, John Daniels won
Yes.
in 1989.
In 1989.
So let's go back to that as a perspective.
Okay.
Here we are 30 years later. We had John DeStefano for 20 years.
Mhm.
We had Mayor Harp for 6 years. And here we are with,
John Daniels did 2 terms.
he did 2 terms. Here we are with Justin Elicker. And he's kind of a unknown. I mean, he did do time on the Board of Aldermen, but
Yeah.
he's not John DeStefano or Tony Harp or John Daniels.
For
all
that
of
matter.
whom-
Yeah.
All of whom had some sort of higher positions.
Well, not only that, but sort of were groomed or at least
Right.
taken in
Right.
by the Democratic Party.
Yes.
You
Both
know-
Harp and Daniels went up to the state capitol.
Yes.
DeStefano was the back of the room financial guy for Benny DeLito.
Right.
And he did a good job at that. And had some growing pains in his first term as mayor. He lost to John Daniels, actually, in the
Yes.
primary.
And
I
that's
think,
how
of
he
89.
became head of the Connecticut Tennis
Center.
Foundation Center. And
So, like, these people, for lack of a better word, were and are players.
right.
So now we have someone who it doesn't really have that
doesn't have that
depth.
not only the
or-
depth, but he's never managed something as large as a city. He's
Yeah.
never really had that sense of the politics involved in it.
And he got embraced by, I hate to use this word, but the machine.
Yeah, what's left of it.
Right.
It's not the machine that you and I knew.
Or the Arthur Barberi days
Yeah.
of
Oh,
that machine.
yeah.
That
Oh,
was
yeah.
cutthroat
That was a machine.
Yes.
You know, that's what that
or
was.
even the fractious machine of the late Wendell Harp
yes.
and his folks.
yes.
So
Willie
at
Green and the crew.
Yeah. At one point, Mayor Harp was part of the machine.
Yeah, but she wasn't part of New Haven politics.
Correct, because she always was
She was always
at the Capitol.
Yes.
And, okay, but she was embraced by the machine.
Yes.
Am I not right?
You are correct.
So if I were interviewing her, or even just asking her personally, at what point in the 6 years did the machine decide that they weren't going to support you anymore?
That's a good question.
That's kind of what I want to know, because I didn't realize it until the spring that, the quote unquote, whatever the machine is these days,
Mhm.
wasn't really backing her.
Yeah.
So what did she do something? What decision? What was the turning point, the
For
pivot
them.
point?
Well, I think that's a question you could also ask Marty Looney,
Correct.
because, this sort of kind of is his baby, right?
I always thought initially that he was behind her initial run.
Yes,
Very
he was.
supportive.
And he was very
So
supportive.
when did people like Marty and some of the other delegation members decide we're not supporting you this time around?
Mhm.
What was it? Was it the airport? Was it the craziness in City Hall?
And
Was
you know
it-
what? Nobody talked about the airport. We didn't even talk about it last night.
Yeah.
Give us a little rundown, because I forgot about that.
Well, the airport, after John DeStefano worked with Mayor Maturo, and after like 10 contentious years
Right.
to get this decision, this document that there would be no further airport expansion, she decided that there could be if we did this or that. And she basically, I'll call it a compact.
Okay.
She decided to disturb that, and that got everybody
Upset.
inflamed. That's right in Marty Looney's district. So I don't know if that was the pivot point.
Yeah.
But it was so really nonsensical, the amount of property that they were dealing with. But there's Morse Creek, and there's folks that have to live every day by that airport.
Right.
I mean, I spent my
Right.
first 10 years as a kid there with whisper jets that were anything but
whisper.
soft.
Yeah.
Cracking plaster, glasses breaking, fatal airplane crash in a fog.
Mm-hmm.
So she believed that by the Tweed expansion, or whatever was going to be expanded,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't going to be the major expansion that happened in the DeStefano years, where
Right.
they took some of Dodge Avenue out. Whatever this minor expansion was going to be was going to help economic development. And we talked about this, that, it wasn't really, in the end, it really wasn't going to amount to a hill of beans. It was going to amount
Right.
to maybe another carrier or two coming
in, but it wasn't anything that was going to change the economic dreams of East Haven or New Haven.
Correct.
So
The juggernaut
could have
of
been-
Tweed was back in from the 20s to the 60s. They should have stopped development over there and
Yeah.
decided what's the plan for the airport.
right.
By the 80s, the 70s and the 80s came, that whole area was encroached by houses, even on the East Haven side.
Right.
So,
And they should have worked. They should have been more foresighted.
and they weren't in the
And they
40s and the
weren't.
50s and 60s. They just kept building.
It just kept
When
building,
Legion
thinking that they were
Avenue-
going to take houses.
Right. When Legion Avenue came down under Mayor Lee, a lot of those folks moved to North Haven, or they moved to
Mhm.
the Cove. They moved to East Haven. What was the forward plan for Tweed?
Right.
It's like it's like putting a round peg in a square hole.
Mhm.
We covered umpteen thousand stories about carriers coming in, carriers
And coming
leaving.
out.
So she kind of got caught up in that. I don't know who advised her on that. I could guess, but I won't.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one big thing. And then you come
All
from
the-
a family of
the other-
educators.
Yeah.
The whole education thing.
Yeah. And we know that Mayor Harp is an intelligent woman.
Well, yes.
She's a strategic thinker. She is and has been a leader. So you have to wonder if it's the people that she placed around her who were short-sighted, if you will, who did not see the big picture.
Yeah, I think in the third term, yes. Justin Elicker had some gravitas last night in praising her.
Yeah, and saying that he was going to keep staff.
Keep staff. He says he credited her for her 30 years of public service.
Mhm.
He said Toni Harper will be remembered not for the division between us over the last couple of months, but for taking down the fence on the New Haven
Mhm.
Hamden line way out in West Rock.
Yeah, the Brookside piece. Brookside
Rockview housing
Yeah.
project that now has single family homes on it, and
Yeah.
that fence along Wooden Street.
Yep,
Created Youthstad for kids. That I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I'm even pronouncing it
you
right.
are. Yeah.
Youthstad for kids, and ensuring that the Q house would be constructed. So those are benchmarks in her 6 years.
Yeah.
That in and of itself.
But she also continued the economic development that
Yes.
John DeStefano
Yes.
had started.
the
She
Long
completed
Wharf,
a lot of projects.
the Long
Canal
Wharf project.
Dock.
Yeah, you've been there, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. Unfortunately, the bigger things were magnified
Yeah.
and
Got public.
got
really
very public.
The
You know,
education stuff was really
The
killing her.
education piece.
If Carol Burks left in August or early September, would she have won the primary?
Well,
We could play the what if game.
yeah, you could play the what if game because I don't know if parents would have it would have made them any
Well,
difference
there was the
because
bus snafu.
right. That's what I was going to say.
And
the
again,
whole
this
bus
is how
thing.
people vote. I mean,
Yeah.
they vote either their wallet or what
Or
issues,
or issues that affect their quality of life.
or they stay home because there's no reason to go and vote. But in New Haven, there was a reason.
There was
both
a
for
reason.
the primary and in the general.
Yeah. And when you start to talk about primary, because I was having this discussion with your other favorite person in my family, not my mother, but my daughter. And she can't get past the fact, because we were walking to the polls last night, and she was saying, why doesn't New Haven have more than one party on the ballot?
The Republican Party, from my folks around me, went bye-bye in the 70s. They, in order to get Benny DeLito elected,
Correct.
they raided the Republican rolls and they switched people to Democrats.
And never switched them back.
And they never switched them back. Plus, there was a lot of white flight.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republican Party, at times in the last 30 years, has had a little traction. I mean, 30 years ago when Mayor Daniels won, there were, I think, 4 alders
Right, who
that
were
were
Republicans.
Republican.
Yeah.
There may have even been a Green Party candidate
Yep.
during his tenure.
Yep.
And then somehow in during the DeStefano 2 decades, the Republican Party completely diminished. There always was a Republican town chairman. There still is.
There still is.
And there are registered Republicans, but they are so diminished at this point that it's kind of a joke.
Well, and you and I always have this conversation. There were Republicans at one point that could have been mayor in New Haven. We know Chris DePino could have been mayor at one point had he really wanted it, because Democrats saw him as someone who was progressive.
Roby Pooley.
And Roby Pooley, we always talk about,
right.
because she was truth to power.
Yes.
I mean, back when women necessarily were making a voice, but people still weren't taking them seriously.
Right.
And she demanded and got that seat at the table.
Right.
Here was this woman who was out of East Rock who could have very easily sat home and just wrote checks, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And she came out
She was a
of that
fighter.
neighborhood with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And she was about New Haven.
She kept everybody on their toes.
Yeah.
So there were times in recent times, in the last 30 years, more so in the 90s than in the 2000s, in this century,
Mm-hmm.
going back to the late 20th century, yes. But it seems to just be so diminished that they just can't get it together. Even to get one alder
Yeah.
on the board of
Aldermen.
there's just not one. They can't even get one.
But is that because, John, the philosophy of the Republicans to people have not changed?
Well, in a big city like New Haven, probably yes. And plus, it takes a lot of money even to run a little
To run a campaign.
Yeah.
And you really got to be
a firebrand.
Yeah.
Like Roby was, and you had Sandy Astorita,
Yeah,
and you had Chris
right.
DePino, and there was one more,
There's one more.
George Gallo.
Yeah.
Those folks, they were firebrands, and they were, you really got
they
to
got
have
attention.
the activism.
Yeah,
yeah.
you gotta
And they
have
lost,
the
eventually
activism.
lost,
Yeah.
but they I think were on a couple of terms.
Yeah.
And there were some Green Party candidates, I think, out of Ward 2, maybe,
Yeah.
which was Tony Harp's ward.
Which was her ward. Yep.
Yeah,
And-
so Elliker praised Mayor Harp. I think he did a great job on that. And last night he talked about being inclusive and bringing the folks on. And again, today in his news presser, he talked about, he's going to have people in City Hall that are on 4-year, I guess, contracts
Yeah.
that are going to be there, or overlays. And he's going to actually look to bring folks in on his transition team.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take him at his word. I don't think we have any other.
Yeah, you don't have anything else to go by.
Right.
Some would argue that he is in this place because of privilege. Because you couldn't have a person of color who did not run something before
Right.
come in and do this. Some will say it was just a vote against Tony, no matter who it was.
Right. Well, from what I read, there were only 3 wards that she pulled,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very low voter turnout.
Yeah, there was
wards.
low voter turnout in New Haven
He won
last night.
70% of the electorate that went to the polls.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we can say it's about race at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He had the support of the people he needed the support of, and she didn't.
Yeah.
And I think by staying in the race, I saw that rally over the weekend at City Hall. Those were folks that really believed in her, and that's
Yeah.
what citizenship and civics is all about. I mean,
Right.
let the folks have their rally.
Right.
They really believe.
They believed that she was someone who could do the job.
Right. They had a choice.
And they
New
had a
Haven
choice.
Folks had a choice for a change.
And they had a choice. And I think, too, there's been, and I'm kind of paraphrasing Sister Emma Jones, in the respect that her disappointment comes from that this is sort of the end of an era, having civil rights, having someone who fought for civil rights, and they are no longer in office. What does that mean for civil rights in this city? And I think Elliker tried to answer that question today. I think he, has said that he does want to work with everyone, but I don't know how that's going to be received over time. I think that, and like most politicians, when they first come into office, everything he does is going to be under a microscope.
Oh, yeah.
And
who he picks, who he doesn't pick.
Yeah.
In local politics, you make one friend a day and 10 enemies a day. He also said today he plans to continue to spend time in the communities.
Mm-hmm.
And he's listening to the folks who are saying, the residents of the city, their needs need to have better attention. They had that C-click fix.
Yeah.
I know when I lived in City Point,
Yeah.
I used to use that.
Yeah.
And that actually was a good thing.
It's a decent tool.
But there needs to be a better vehicle to do that kind of stuff.
Well, I will tell you that Elliker's boots on the ground team really worked hard.
Yeah.
His grassroots campaign was something to admire.
I don't think he was just sitting back. I think he really truly worked. Even
and he's
from
been
September
at work.
to November.
Yeah, he was at work probably this time last year, trying to pull coalitions, talk to people, go into different events, go into different neighborhoods, and really see what people are talking about and what their concerns are.
Well, he was educating himself too. I mean, he wasn't
at the same time.
Alder.
Yeah,
he was an alder, but from East Rock, and alder from East Rock is a lot different than being an alder from West Rock.
Yep,
or the East Shore.
Yep.
He did talk today about he's going to quickly put together an agenda with the state delegation because no sooner will we be in another legislative session. He talked about meeting with Alder Walker Myers. She's the president.
Yes.
And the Board of Ed. He praised Dr. Tracy, who's the interim school superintendent.
Yes.
And he said that the turmoil in the Board of Ed needs to end, and the school system needs stability. He didn't say whether Dr. Tracy would remain or not.
Yeah.
But I think she's on record of saying she'd be interested for the job, right?
Yeah. So, and I think the folks who do the daily work of the Board of Ed, the faculty and the staff, I said this last night, appreciate the stability that they have now instead of it being something that they considered volatile. And
it was.
And, for a lot of people, it was.
It goes back to why is the mayor on the Board of Ed?
Yeah, Babs asked that question last night.
Harp's
doing.
That was John DeStefano's
That was John DeStefano's doing, absolutely.
And to me, as a reporter and as an educator, I don't believe the mayor should be on the Board of Ed.
But, well, I think that is something that is probably we can look to see change or at least be challenged.
He also said, Elliker said today in the presser this afternoon that he was on the phone with Mayor Ganim, Mayor Bronin, and Mayor O'Leary Waterbury today to reach out to them for some guidance. And I think that was a smart move too, because those are mayors that are entrenched in problematic cities that face great challenges.
Yeah. And not only that, the simple fact that some of the challenges are similar and they look to New Haven to see what's going on here and how they can take pieces of whatever is being done and put it toward the solution that best fits their town.
Right. And the double-edged sword is Yale, obviously.
Yeah.
And a reporter asked him, have you called the Yale president, Salve? And he said, yes, I've spoken to President Salve.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a double-edged sword. Yale does wonderful things, but yet, And
he wants them to give up some money.
Yeah. And that's an argument as old as time.
I was going to say.
And they have. And I mean,
They have. But they got a pretty healthy endowment.
Correct.
So that's what they're looking at. They could give more.
They can give more.
It wouldn't hurt them. Not the way that their endowment has been growing to the point that the cat that manages the endowment, everybody wants to talk to him.
Right.
And he doesn't talk to anybody.
Right.
So it's one of those things where if your endowment is doing this well and you have somebody who's going to be there probably at least another 10 years managing it, you could siphon off a little money and it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt.
They definitely have made inroads.
I think they're better than they were when we used to cover the graduate.
The GSO.
The GSO
rallies.
The GSO rallies. I think they're a lot.
I think under DeStefano we saw.
But there's room for improvement always.
Yeah, under DeStefano, those years we saw them give up a little bit more, but they always can give more.
Yeah. Because, they can afford it. Not only monetarily, and I know that they do a lot in the community, but again, it doesn't hurt for them to do a little bit more because there are still certain levels where it's like, okay, this is community.
Right.
And then it's almost like on this end, we're doing all community and then you're shut off.
Right.
This is not for you. And Being a university community, absolutely. Should there be things that are exclusive to them? Yes, there should be.
Mhm.
However, when it comes to you wanting this community support and you don't open doors, but yet still you come to them and say, we'd like your support. Well, how do we know that if you're not opening doors in obvious places?
Right.
Yale Rep has all these wonderful plays,
Right.
but when you
Who
go,
has access?
right, when you go, it's like 10 people of color in there, and we're all there on the same night. And it's a matter of really communicating, and that's one instance I'm just using, but it's really a matter of communicating with the community and say, hey, listen, we have these things, and maybe doing things on the pre-K and kindergarten level when it comes to theater and drama, just small things that show that you have an interest in the people in the neighborhoods that really surround Yale and make it go, because those are the people who work.
I mean, it's
in
a
those
gem
places.
in the middle of the city. I
Yeah.
mean, picture what would New Haven be without a place like Yale? I mean,
You don't want me to answer that.
Justin Elliker today said he's going to cast the net wide for people to be in his on his eventual team,
Hmm.
and you're only as good as the people that you have behind you. Benny DeLito he had some great
He
folks,
had great people behind
strong
him.
people
Yep.
that went on to do other things.
Yep.
Then we have Mayor Daniels, who was well-intentioned and well-meaning, and some of the
And
folks
some will argue that the people around him in that second
kind of
term,
capsized the ship,
yeah,
including the police chief.
yes,
And then Mayor DeStefano, for 20 years, he hung on for 20 years because he had been, he worked under DeLito. He
Well,
knew what to
listen.
do.
yeah, and not only that, but John DeStefano was somebody who was no nonsense.
Correct.
He was someone who drove around this city every morning. He looked at it, and when he got to work, if it wasn't up to par, you heard about it.
He was a good manager.
Yeah,
Sometimes
he's a
he didn't
task-
have the best people skills.
Right, he was
in
a
the
task
beginning,
guy.
especially.
Yeah,
He was a good person for that. He knew the city backwards and forwards.
he knew who to call for different things.
Exactly. He worked well with Yale. He worked well with the hospitals.
Mhm.
He worked well with the Chamber of Commerce. He knew the neighborhoods.
Yep.
That didn't mean he didn't have opposition on the Board of Alders. Of course he did.
He had, let's face it, in 19 years, if you don't have any opposition,
Right.
what have you done?
Right.
Somebody somewhere at some point is going to try to speak truth to power.
Right.
And it's up to you as to how you take it.
Right.
And everybody knew that John DeStefano was one who would go toe to toe with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he would definitely let you know how he felt if a project was not going the way he perceived it to.
Well, and, he would invite us in, or he wouldn't invite us into City Hall, depending on what the issue was. And
I
he
know.
meant it. And,
And he
you
meant it.
cowered as a reporter. You cowered, or, you stayed there and waited for him to try to
Right.
slip out the door to get
Right.
a word. But, I mean, he called the shots.
Yep.
Then Mayor Harp came along, different demeanor.
And different style of doing things,
yeah,
different way of
different
doing
demeanor.
things. Yeah.
I mean, she said, I think she's going to, do something in public service. And we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
Up in Hartford, she was wonderful with public health, wonderful with Health and Human Services Committee. She knows budget. She was on appropriation and
Right. For
finance.
years.
I mean, this is someone that really should just go take a nice vacation
But she probably will
and
after
then come
this.
back and dedicate yourself. Maybe go back to the Hill
Yeah.
Health Center
Yeah.
and do something and make your mark again. Right? She was from the Hill Health
Yeah.
Center, correct?
Yeah. She worked with homeless
Yeah.
there. That was her
There's
contingent.
a lot of social service oriented things
Yes.
that she, in her lifespan now, can really make an impact on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Things are
She still
cyclical.
has, 8 weeks, 10 weeks?
Yeah. And she promised a smooth transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see a reason why there shouldn't be.
No. I think unless something really comes out of the woodwork between now and inauguration day.
Right.
You know, we will see.
We learn from our mistakes in campaigning and also in just living.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was definitely something to watch. This was definitely something to watch.
And it's be curious to see where we're going. I don't think we're going backwards. I mean, I started to talk about 30 years ago at this time, John Daniels became mayor. That was huge.
It was. And the sky, you know, my joke to myself was the sky didn't fall in, you know.
New Haven survived.
New Haven survived.
I don't think he really wanted to be mayor personally, but he did it. He did it to the best of his ability. He dealt with some of the folks he surrounded himself with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had to deal with we reporters every day. But he did a decent job. He did what he could do with what he had.
What he had. Yeah, and he did it.
I don't think we're going back in history. Things are cyclical. When are we going to have the first Latino mayor?
That's a whole nother conversation.
I mean, you know, you could go that way too.
Yeah. And
you've had a black male and a black female.
Woman, yeah.
So, you know, we could argue when we're going to have a Latino mayor.
A Latino female mayor.
Or a Latino female mayor.
Yeah.
Or an Asian mayor. I mean,
an Asian mayor. Afghani mayor.
What was that editorial
Ecuadorian.
that was written a couple of months ago
Yes.
by our friend?
Yes. Why not? John DeAndre, always good to have you in the house. Thank you so much for this post-mortem. Harry, you are the best. Thank you so much for all of your time and energy as well last night and today, because I'm sure you had to rest up. And now I am going to do the same.
Good job.
Thank you, John, for being here. John DeAndre is my political commentary person. He is someone who has served as a state legislative aide, former chief of staff for the town of Hamden, and now teaches social studies in the greater New Haven area. So once again, John, thanks. And this has been the show, 103.5 FM, WNHH, NewHavenIndependent.org. Thank you, Harry.